Welcome back. It's a minute to the top of the hour and News Hour continues. This is a conversation you have been waiting for. And join me now, some of the best brains on television, Dr. Muluka, Joseph Simeha, and Steve Ogola. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And obviously, I know you are hoping that Kisa Wandera is still on the show today, but no, I'm right here to have the discussion. Now, let's begin with the hot topic in the country right now. And this is important, Barack. This is very important. There is a contradiction tonight. Yesterday, Wycliffe Oparanya, the Kakamega governor, spoke about stopping reggae, or at least pausing reggae. He said that the priority should be given to COVID-19 right now. And of course, today we saw a statement from the party leader, Raila Odinga, not forgetting that they are all presidential candidates in ODM right now. Let me begin with you, Dr. Muluka. That contradiction, how do you call it? Perhaps you can put it better. What Wycliffe Oparanya said yesterday, which a lot of people said made sense. Ben Kitili yesterday on Newsline had a panel here, and they delved on that. And then straight today, Raila Odinga says, reggae is still on. It looks as missed priorities. Barack.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. And to come straight to the point, I think this is strategic, Ken. All does not seem to be well in the house of the BBI. You saw that the JLAC was not able to present a report to the National Assembly last week, and Speaker Justin Muturi sent them back to go and deliberate further. And they were supposed to be returning a report to the House tomorrow, which unfortunately they now will not be able to do so on account of the ongoing COVID-19 related protocols. But that is an indication that all is not well. We have had 3 governors suggesting that the referendum and the BBI are not a priority. Governor Oparanya, Governor Sospeter Ojaamong of Busia, and Governor Okoth Obado of Migori. Clearly, things are not in order. We had a few weeks ago James Orengo, Amolo Tiende, and a couple of others, even Junet Mohammed, suggesting that they may have to place their priorities elsewhere. Okay. And I think that as a bargaining chip, you send mixed signals to the other camp, just so as to raise the stakes, so that you are able to perhaps have your perspectives accommodated. But certainly, all is not well with BBI.
Okay, okay. Let me bring Simeha. Simeha, Wycliffe Oparanya, the governor for Kakamega County, is also the deputy party leader. He doesn't just speak, and when he speaks, he's saying something.
Ken, thank you very much for having me tonight. First of all, BBI is a political project. People who get surprised when they see and or hear controversies within a project like BBI, which is a political project, then do not understand what politics is. A political project like BBI has a lot of interests at play. And this is not new. So when you hear Honorable Oparanya talk about what he's talking about, it is either he's expressing something from his own, based on his own interests, or based on a section of the party, or based on a section of the constituency he represents. So it's not surprising at all, for us who have been in this, in politics, first of all, but also in the BBI project for a while, there are no surprises. This is what is to be expected. It is not like some fait accompli that you learn the people of Kenya something, and then they have to run with it as is. It is a national conversation. A national conversation does not just have one view. It has all manner of views at any time, until the last day we agree. And you know what? It's not the last day, the last thing in history just now, BBI. It's just a part of an ongoing conversation. So for me, Ken, I can tell you authoritatively without any fear of contradiction that There is nothing strange. There is no trouble at all, at least not in ODM with regards to BBI. What we see is completely normal of a political project.
However, Joe, would be this. Wycliffe Oparanya, you said that he's expressing his own interest or an interest of section of the party. I think it's in everyone's interest, not that interest, that the priority is given to COVID. So why would you put it down to his own interests? I mean, he was speaking for the larger population, unless I didn't understand you.
You understood me, and I'm glad you framed that supplementary question or comment the way you have done. BBI and the attention to COVID-19 are not necessarily mutually exclusive. If, Ken, you've gone through the BBI report, and especially if you look at the policy section, policy doctrines on health and wellness of Kenyans, national policy framework, proposed policy framework for health and wellness for Kenyans, you would see the urgency of implementing that part of BBI for combating COVID-19, or at the very least, making a contribution towards combating COVID-19. The problem, Ken, I'll tell you just quickly, is many people have reduced BBI to the constitutional amendment bill and the politics around it. It's much more than that. When you hear Raila Odinga talk and say that reggae is still on, that's what he means. There's a lot more going on than what you see playing out in the on the public stage. And I've just given you one example. Go to the section of policy, go to the specific subsection on health and wellness, and see what is therein, and think, if this is implemented, wouldn't it be a contribution towards combating COVID-19? Okay,
and I think we haven't reduced it to Section 55 of the Constitution. I think it's the politicians who have driven us to believe this is about Section 55 of the Constitution, because they don't talk about the policy as much as they talk about the referendum. But I'll come back to you, and Barack also wants to say something on this. But let me bring Steve. Steve, as a lawyer, you're one of the people who are allowed to read too much in statements, but I want you to tell me what was not said, because we heard what Oparanya said, but what we didn't hear could be even more important.
Ken, thank you. I think the most important thing to note is that there's a moral dilemma that is actively competing with the political interest that is organized around the BBI. The moral and practical dilemma is this. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Majority of Kenyans are hard-pressed financially and economically. So when they hear conversations around deploying so much resources to the BBI referendum, questions are emerging, and those are legitimate concerns that should we not wait and combine this with the general election, which is less than 1.5 years away, or can we not do it differently? So I think if you hear people like Governor Oparanya speaking, the question that arises is this: does Oparanya have a discernible interest in the outcome of the BBI? No. Okay. He's a second-term governor. He is not running for any office. He says, although he says that he's angling for the ODM presidential candidate, yes, I can tell you without an iota of doubt that Governor Oparanya will not be the ODM presidential candidate. Governor Joho will not be the ODM presidential candidate. But
Steve, how would you know that?
I mean, you just need to study the politics of ODM and politics of Jubilee and national politics around party leadership. I think the person that gets to fly the party ticket must have political clout, not just within the region where they come from, but also nationally. Okay. Does Governor Oparanya have a national appeal? In all honesty, outside ODM politics and outside Western Kenya, he doesn't have that national appeal. He cannot attract the kind of traction, does not have the kind of traction that, say, the Right Honorable Prime Minister would have. Governor Joho is a political heavyweight who is also serving a second term, but he's built his career around ODM party leader Raila Odinga. It's unlikely that even in a fair contest that Governor Oparanya and Governor Joho would come even a close second to Raila Odinga if he was vying for that, for the ODM ticket. So Oparanya knows that he has the liberty to speak freely and to speak to some of the issues that the ordinary Kenyans are grappling with, without caring to look behind his back to see who is watching, and without caring about the unintended consequences. Because the unintended consequence is you could be branded as a mole, or you could be branded as someone who's sabotaging the handshake, and that can have political consequence of relegating you in the periphery. Okay. He's not running for office, so he can speak more freely. But I think also, I agree with what Jamie said, the handshake and the BBI process is a political tool. A political tool to organize the political space, because it's being driven by political leaders that have a discernible interest in the outcome of the next election. And this process, happening just under 2 years to the next election, surely will have a very, very decidedly political connotation. Yes, it's about amending the Constitution, but therein lies deep-seated political interests that are now forming, emerging, and re-emerging again. So that is where we are, I think. So.
Okay, very interesting, because they are not the only ones. Busia Governor Sospeter Ojaamong, who was at one time worked closely with the ODM leader, has also spoken about this priority. But Bharat, I saw you sort of quipping when he was speaking, when Joe was speaking on the other side. There is no problem. That's what he said. Everyone must expect this, some back and forth. But my question, even as you respond to that, did these governors, Sospeter Ojaamong, now we have Oparanya, we have Okotobado, and all these sentiments around priorities right now, did they just wake up and realize that we need to change tack, and they are the ones who rallied their counties to pass the bill?
First, I think it is not true at all to say that any politician, including even an MCA, has no discernible interest in the outcome of the 2022 election, presidential or whatever it may be. Second-term governors would like to graduate to the next level. Whether they are going to graduate to that level or not is another matter, but they would obviously be trying to raise the stakes so that they book a position at the negotiating table for themselves. And sometimes that is done by sending conflicting signals. However, what is happening in the BBI is not a coincidence. I see this as something being very strategic. Okay. I guide myself with the consideration that 3 weeks ago we had Senator Orengo and Rarieda MP Otiende Amolo complaining about how the BBI was being manipulated by people they said were in the civil service and who are trying to derail Raila Odinga's presidential ambitions. We take note that Raila Odinga, it's now official, has applied for the ODM ticket. It's no longer a matter of what he was saying earlier on, that this will depend on the outcome of the BBI. We also take very informed note that these people have said that they may scuttle the process if it is not going to favor Raila Odinga. And I see this as a deliberate doublespeak, where one end of the entity sends out a certain signal, another end sends a different signal. I even take further note that the people who met today and issued that statement were not a formal institutional structure or organ of ODM. It was a number of MPs from Luo Nyanza, with the only exceptions being Bosire, the party treasurer, and Gladys Wanga, who was described as a senior member of the party. And I think that that meeting, in fact, was not even convened to talk about the BBI. It was convened to talk about the spat that we saw, the outburst that we saw.
With Governor Oparanya?
Not with Governor Oparanya, Millie Odhiambo, John Mbadi, and Junet Mohammed, about some territorial conflict between Migori and Homa Bay counties, but taking advantage of that opportunity to also speak about the BBI, the ODM position in the BBI, the way I understand it, and I'm happy that J.M. Ismeha is finally admitting that this is a political process. All along, they have insisted that it was a legal process, but now they admit, they confess it is a political process. They confess that there's a lot more going on that we don't seem to be taking into account.
Okay.
And it boils down to the fact that they want to push their candidate to the forefront. I agree with Steve Ogola that that candidate is Raila Odinga, but he must make belief around the effort by causing Oparanya to also say he's running, to cause Joho to also say he's running. But ultimately, for those two, they up the stakes so that they are at the negotiating table and they bring some numbers from wherever. Okay. But all is not well within the BBI, between the Kieleweke arm of Jubilee in the BBI and ODM in the BBI, the issues about constituencies, the issues about the architecture of government, and other unresolved issues. The issues of whether this thing should be taken to a referendum or whether it can be sorted out without going to a referendum. And to the extent that there's that tug of war, there's a problem, and we are going to be hearing more of this in the coming days.
Increasingly. All right. I know, Simeha, you want to respond to this because I have a supplementary for Barack, but go on.
Yes, I just want to say that I'm surprised Barack is saying what he's saying with tremendous respect. If we've been talking of a project that is about looking at the problems of Kenya, you know, the 9-point agenda, if you look at those nine points, and if I just give you one, for example, divisive elections or ethnic competition and so on, are those legal problems? We have been talking about a political problem. When my senior brother Barack says that we have been lying and now we are admitting, he actually is very wrong. We don't even need to say it. When we've been saying BBI is about building bridges, uniting the country, transforming the governance system, looking at our relationships between each other, revisiting our history to see where the rain began to beat us, surely you can't reduce that to legal and say this is a legal project. You don't need to be told by anybody that this is not a legal project. Okay. This is a political project. It has always been, it will always be. When you talk of a national conversation, read those two BBI reports, Task Force and Steering Committee. The central point is a national conversation on a number of issues. The legal part of it is only a small aspect. You know, for example, the proposed legislative changes. And in fact, even the constitutional amendment, you cannot reduce it to a legal thing. Constitutional amendment is social, is legal, is political, is cultural, is many, many things.
Okay.
The problem, I think, with a lot of people who view, you know, let's say view ODM and its leader with a pinch of salt, if I may use a combination of those words, is that they will always like to find something negative, something to make it look like, oh, look at them, they are losing now. Look at them, they are losing. They began by completely opposing and saying this is trash. And then they, with my senior Barack being in NC, came and appeared nicely, gave fantastic points, presentation to BBI. And then again, they turn and turn their back to it. And then again, they come back and say they want to lead it. And then now they're turning to say, look, they're losing it. We are very consistent in ODM. This is a political project. Let me just finalize, Ken, by saying that some of the intrigues on which you see information coming out in the public have been there. I would be surprised if there weren't any senior public servants in Kenya attempting to manipulate any political process to protect their interest. That would be my surprise.
That would be surprise.
I would be surprised if the current president and his associates were not trying to manipulate political processes in this country to protect their interests. That would be my surprise.
Okay.
For us, there's... Yeah.
Proceed.
Very well. Yeah, I was just going to say that for us is... What matters to us is what we have put in place to ensure that anything that betrays the interests of Kenyans, the reasons for which ODM and the ODM party leader went into the handshake and BBI, anything that is a betrayal to that becomes extremely costly politically. So that plan is there. That strategy is there. That's why, for us, all these things, they don't worry. They don't worry us at all.
All right. And as they don't worry you, as you say, I'd like to go to Steve, because, Steve, there's a sentiment that ODM may be looking for way out of the BBI because they've realized it's untenable. I'm going to talk to you about that. But even before we talk about that, just to add on what Joe is saying, one of the senior party officials, actually the election director, spoke about BBI being an ODM document, and he said it right here on the show. Let's listen to what Junet Mohammed had to say.
The BBI belongs to us as ODM. It's our document. So who's using us? Maybe it's us using other people. It's our document.
At no point...
The BBI is an ODM document.
At no point...
I can tell you authoritatively.
You've never felt... If the BBI is an ODM document,
yes,
then the tagline is, this is a Kenyan document.
Yes.
Where do you draw the line? Because
ODM is part of Kenya.
All right, very interesting, Steve, and I know Joe would like to comment on this, but let me go to Steve. Steve, is it that opportunity that chicken have come home to roost, and they're realizing perhaps we're pushing too much, and there is this sentiment from the governors, and I've mentioned their names. Are you looking at this from the angle I am, that ODM perhaps feeling that it's time to withdraw because this can't go on, or we're likely to fail?
I think in the scheme of things, if ODM is not going to use BBI to advance its political interest, and that is to say, if ODM cannot extract political dividend from the entire BBI process as to push Raila's political and presidential ambition forward, then they have no business in it. They have no business in it, and is that a bad thing? No, because I think even the political drivers of this BBI process, like if you look at this new alliance, One Kenya alliance, they're also trying to extract political dividend by endorsing the process. And that is the part of the conversation that I agree with JME, that there's the political side of it. And if you contradistinguish the foundation of the handshake than the 9-point agenda as against the constitutional amendment bill, I have serious fundamental constitutional and legal problems with the constitutional amendment bill as it were. I've spoken to them because it will weaken and undermine the integrity of the Constitution in a very fundamental way. And I don't think a lot has been said to persuade us that the architecture and design of our Constitution, as we know it today, will be preserved. For instance, if you're going to take away the decision to review and revise and adjust boundaries from IBC back to the political elite, I can tell you, anybody looking at that objectively will have a serious problem. If you're going to make adjustments to the Constitution in a manner that affects the functional independence and decisional independence of our judges and the judiciary, I can tell you, anybody looking at it objectively will raise serious and legitimate concerns. But if you remove the Constitutional Amendment Bill and you remain with the handshake and the political agenda, there can never be anything wrong. In fact, you cannot criminalize or deconstitutionalize a handshake, and you cannot deconstitutionalize or criminalize a conversation. This country is founded on conversations. Democracies are founded on conversations. If President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga shook hands and decided, let us move this country forward in terms of what ails us, I think from the conversation I've picked from leadership in Luo Nyanza, there was a bit of celebration and relief because they felt that Luos have paid the price. A lot of blood has been shed on behalf of the Odingas and the Kenyattas. And the handshake provided a perfect opportunity to end the deep-seated political rivalry between the Odingas and the Kenyattas, which has expanded on a national scale to be the Kikuyus and the Luos. That is the unspoken part of the political conversation. There are other interests around it. But if they are going to have a conversation that reduces political tension, that assures us of the integrity of the electoral process, that assures us of equitable distribution of resources, how can that be an unconstitutional conversation? So the original framing, Ken, of BBI and the 9-point agenda must be celebrated for what it is. It was properly conceptualized, but in between, and I think ODM is expressing some concern, but it's not well articulated. In between, it appears that some persons, either in the public service or elsewhere, have hijacked the process, and ODM is caught up between a rock and a hard place. How do we preserve the original intention without abandoning the process? Or how do we go on with the process without losing the political dividend that they hope they would extract from it? Those are political questions, but I think for us lawyers, our greater concern is that when we have a document that would have impact on our constitutional arrangement, our architecture and design, then we have to look at it for what it is and try to see how much we can do as much as possible to protect the integrity and the unity within our constitution.
Very well said. I'll come to you, Daktari, but let me ask Joe this question. The school of thought that the handshake was Raila's and President Kenyatta's, and yet BBI was a pure Raila initiative or a pure Raila agenda. Where would you place that statement?
No, it's a misplaced and false statement.
Okay.
The handshake was between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta to symbolize something they initiated, but not limited to themselves.
Okay.
They don't even have the power to limit that to themselves. If Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta want to have some kind of reconciliation and camaraderie, coming together and so on, that is limited to the both of them, only the two of them, then they better do that on the basis of something private they have between themselves.
Okay.
But the things they came out on the steps of Harambee House and talked about, those things are not the preserve of Raila Odinga and Kenyatta.
Okay.
They are not the preserve of Kikuyus and Luos. Those are things that bedevil Kenyans.
Okay.
They were voiced by Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, but they have no monopoly of ownership of knowledge of what the problem is and what the solution is.
Okay.
But they initiated as leaders.
Okay.
The moment they initiate, the rest of us have a responsibility to seize. If we agree that those things are legitimate problems, legitimate concerns, we seize those things and run with them. Okay. And that's where I find these other, crybaby politicians are miserable failures. They really, if they understood what opportunity this thing presented, they should have seized this thing and even take it away from Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. And as Steve says, and is right, you don't just do it for the sake of, when you are in politics, you don't just do it for the sake of the nation. You don't do it just because of altruism. Yes, you do it for the love of your nation, but you also extract political dividend.
Okay.
That is perfectly in order.
All
I just want to correct Steve. That political dividend is not limited to Raila Odinga's interests. Even for me in Vihiga here, unless I extract some political dividend from that process for the sake of Vihiga County, then BBI will not be serving me. It's not about just Raila Odinga. Okay. I want to see those things translated into some real reforms, into some real opportunities for better participation in governance in Vihiga County.
I think that is geared towards, that statement was just geared towards perhaps using it to propel Raila Odinga into presidency, as opposed to everyone getting a piece of the cake. Joe?
Well, when someone mentions that, I don't even think they are doing a favor for Raila Odinga. I don't think they are propelling Raila Odinga to the presidency when they insist that BBI is his. When for example, Junet says what he said, by the way, I think he has every right to say that. He's claiming his piece of, if you like, piece of flesh from where he stands.
Okay.
As a leader in ODM, he's laying stake to this cake as a leader in ODM.
Okay.
If someone in ANC has a right to also say that BBI is ours, that is if they invested in it. Someone in Jubilee has a right to say BBI is ours.
Okay.
So for me, I just find that people really narrow this debate to some kind of legal debate or 2022 succession, when this is a political question that has been put before us. For me, it presents huge opportunities, well, and also challenges. You know, those people who worry about those who want to use it to hijack this, to manipulate this president, so they are right. I would be surprised if that wasn't happening. But imagine if we all used it as an opportunity to force an honest national conversation on what ails Kenya.
Okay.
I just feel so bad about these crybabies who ran away and now they run back to point fingers when they feel like they're not in control.
Okay.
They had an opportunity to seize this thing
But
and use it for the benefit of Kenya.
All right. Let me now come to Dr. Muluka. You have heard all the sentiments. I want to end this the discussion on this topic because I want to go to the lockdown pain. But even as you respond to what has been said, my interest also is in the fact that that school of thought that is now talking about an attempt of ODM to get out of the situation because they've realized it's untenable. Perhaps do you also think that they may be finding a way out with all these sentiments? Because as I began, I said, when the governor for Kakamega speaks, he doesn't just speak. He speaks the language of Raila Odinga. Not that he doesn't have an independent mind. When Sospeter Ojaamong speaks, he doesn't just speak. He speaks the language of the head of their party. So are they trying to find a way so that it started from the governors and now it's gone to the party leader and so on?
Thank you, Ken. I have listened to a lot of contradictions. I don't even know whether my colleagues are listening to themselves and trying to harmonize the various things that they are saying. But if I begin with a slight correction, I don't use idioms like lying to say of someone that they are lying. I will present the position that you presented before and present the position that you are presenting today. And if in your interpretation that amounts to lying, I leave that judgment to your finer faculties. I will not go into that space. That being said and done, it is important to take note that all along we have been given the impression that the law was defective. There was need to reform the law with regard to such things as the judiciary, such things as ensuring that there is an ombudsman there who is appointed by the president. I don't know whether that ombudsman is supposed to be conducting political processes within the judiciary. There have been issues to do with the architecture and design of the executive. Yes, maybe to the extent that you are talking about some levels of inclusivity there, it is political. The goal that is intended certainly is political, but the process is legal. I do not think that it is in my place to attempt to lecture lawyers on the difference between goals and processes. The process that we are undertaking is a process that is supposed to drive us to a destination. That destination is the goal, and that goal is political. But the process is legal. That is why it is being undertaken within the provisions of certain articles of the Constitution that we have seen signatures collected. We have seen a bill taken to the county assemblies. We have seen the county assemblies, speakers bringing their reports back to Parliament. And we have seen that that process is in the ambit of the legislature as provided by the law, and from there it is supposed now to go out to the citizens, where within that same canopy of the law, it is supposed to undergo final determination. However, the political goals which this legal process is supposed to eventually deliver are now in conflict. And since they are in conflict, we are seeing people pulling in different directions. Mheshimiwa Wycliffe Oparanya is an intelligent individual. So is Sospeter Ojaamong and Okoth Obado. They have not spoken as mad people or as drunk people or as foolish people. They have spoken as people who know what they are speaking about. They belong to the bandwagon that has been telling us that nobody can stop reggae. Does it not surprise us that suddenly, from nowhere, absolutely no prompting from anybody, and in spite of the fact that COVID has been with us for a whole year now, this is the 13th month that we are getting into after this bag arrived here, have they suddenly had a brainwave that has caused them to realize that there is COVID and that the funds that would be going to the referendum had better be spent on addressing the challenges that are arising out of the bag and the complications that it has brought? We are talking about people who are looking for an exit. And it doesn't matter how many pejorative descriptors you want to use against us and call us names, that will not change the truth.
All right, and unless, gentlemen, you want to comment. And now that, yes, Steve.
Something that we must clarify.
Okay.
But it's very important to distinguish the political process around the Building Bridges initiative from the constitutional amendment process. The political process, even if there was no constitutional amendment bill, and ODM leader Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta shook hands, and they were building what may be considered as a new political formation, which in the understanding of other players like Deputy President William Ruto, they would still oppose it. And that is perfectly in order, because you cannot sit back and look at your political constituency being chipped away to benefit another person. So that Kenyans must distinguish the politics at that level. And I think that for the political elites and the political players, they can do their politics as long as they build an alliance that delivers political victory. That's fine. Now, on the legal process, which Senior Barak speaks to, of course, you have your procedural and processual issues, which I can tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 has not been fully complied with, and some of those questions have found their way at the High Court and at the Supreme Court. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Supreme Court referred some of those questions, or nearly all of them, back to the High Court for initial interpretation so that the matter can be escalated upwards. On the substantive issues, it is about reorganizing our power map. I think there's a serious problem there. And any keen observer, because I want the supporters and promoters of BBI to understand that you can still extract the political dividend without compromising our settled constitutional architecture and design.
Okay.
And there's a serious problem when you tinker with the Constitution in a manner that fundamentally alters what is cumulatively to over 20 years of political conversation. And I think those who raise that concern should not be dismissed as unfairly fighting the BBI process. They are fighting the BBI document, the Constitution Amendment Bill. And those who also raise concerns, or those who criticize the handshake, must also be put in the right box where they belong. The right box is the political formation arising out of the handshake will benefit some people, will disadvantage some people. Okay. Those who feel disadvantaged have a right to speak out and try to reorganize. You've seen Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, Musalia Mudavadi, and Gideon Moi coming together in what they're calling one alliance, one Kenyan alliance, because they're thinking, if on the political side, the Right Honorable Prime Minister Odinga runs with this alliance with Uhuru Kenyatta, or maybe with William Ruto, then they may be left in the cold. That is for politicians to debate and then to find a way forward. Okay. But for us as lawyers, our core concern terminates at what is going to be presented at the ballot, and we have a duty, both legal and moral duty, to sensitize Kenyans that if you pass this document the way it is, these are some of the challenges that you'll experience. if you allow the High Court, looking at the recent judgments and the rulings coming from this BBI document, BBI applications and petitions, the High Court is developing cold feet. The Supreme Court is developing cold feet. They know it. Look at the recent ruling where they said we have jurisdiction, but we will not assume it. If you declare you have jurisdiction, then you can't decline it.
Yes.
They turned away the constitutional reference, the reference for adversarial opinion by Nandi County and Kericho County. Having found that they have jurisdiction, they ought to have progressed to make a determination.
Exactly.
But then they said, no. We have jurisdiction. We're not going to assume jurisdiction. Take it back to the High Court. Meanwhile, time is running. I think there's going to be a problem if BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill passes and you want to declare a provision of the Constitution as unconstitutional. We will leave to debate. It is very unlikely that the High Court or the Supreme Court will read the Constitution in such a manner as to find a provision of the Constitution as unconstitutional as against the very Constitution.
Sure.
In our political context, I don't think they want that kind of abrupt maneuvers. And that is where the challenge is.
I'm even confused having said that because it's a dilemma indeed.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a discussion that we can't end, Steve, and it's going to happen. Let's see what happens with the constitutional amendment. Let's see what the High Court, now that they've referred it back. But Joe, I have to give you a minute to conclude this because I need to move. Even as you answer that, there's increasing calls, and we've had a lot of people from ODM, I could mention 2-3 names, talking about the possibility of Raila Odinga working with William Ruto. Just as you respond, because I know you really want to respond to what Dr. Muluka said.
Yes, I just want, let me start by picking something from what Steve said. Steve said our current constitution is a product of not political conversations, more than 20 years of political conversations. Constitution making is not narrowly a legal thing. Constitution making, in fact, is majorly a political agenda. It happens within the confines of the law. Some aspects of it are supervised, by the judiciary within the law. In fact, having a referendum is the ultimate political act because you are sending whatever you've proposed to the people to say yes or no to it.
Okay.
So this thing of limiting and saying that the law and lawyers have some exclusive right to something, that this is purely legal, is not true.
Okay.
Yes, it must happen within a legal framework. It must be supervised within what we've decided for ourselves, as our judiciary, based on what we already have as a constitution and laws. But we cannot deny the people Article 1 of the Constitution, sovereignty.
Okay.
Whatever they decide, they can change their mind over what they decided 10 years ago, and they have that right.
Okay.
On what you ask, Ken,
yes.
In politics, politics is the art of possibilities. And I'm not saying, I'm not qualifying anything. I'm just saying that I personally would not be surprised if Raila Odinga worked with William Ruto, or Raila Odinga worked with the, what's the MP again for Kenyatta's constituency, who never wants to see Raila. Any one of these people who talks very rapidly against Raila Odinga. That is politics.
Okay.
Today, tomorrow, Ken, based on articulation of interest, aggregation and articulation of interests, they can work together.
Okay.
It will not surprise me. Did it surprise you that William Ruto worked with Uhuru Kenyatta? It shouldn't surprise you, but for as long as one goes into those kinds of arrangements with their minimum irreducible principles that I cannot go below this, but on this and this and that interest, we can cooperate.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, I really need to go.
And we are all agreed that there are political goals to this legal process, and that the political goals that ODM has been seeking are in jeopardy. And whether we like it or not, the truth of the matter is that the initiative was taken away from the Dennis Waweru, Junet Mohammed Secretariat.
And taken to
it has been taken to the office of the president. It is sitting under Dr. Karanja Kibicho, that the resources are sitting in that place. and nobody knows how the rest of the processes are going to go, apart from those who are within that circle of Dr. Karanja Kibicho. And for ODM, for the time being, the agenda is to find the fire escape route.
Okay. We'll see if that's what happens. And in politics, no permanent friends or enemies, just interest. Gentlemen, sorry. I have to move this conversation forward. President Uhuru Kenyatta last week reviewed the measures, COVID protocols to secure the country, to protect the country against COVID-19. And over the weekend, there was this pastor